If you're a Christian running for office, any office, from city council to governor, have you committed to a higher standard? A standard that protects truth and advances civil, honest debate, and stays away from the kind of personal attacks aimed at destroying an opponent made in God's image? Do the candidates you support hold to that standard? And what about when you win? How will you uphold the standard Christ himself set to be humble in the face of opposition, to bless and even love them in his name? Tonight you'll meet someone who stakes his claim on doing politics differently. He's just won a big election and he's headed to the state capitol. Representative-elect Scott Barger is next. Don't go away. When you're in the thick of a campaign, it's hard to say no when someone hands you an envelope of inside information about your opponent, information that might win you the election. It's even harder to refuse to hit back when you're the object of attacks, when every day you're hearing lies or half-truths or malicious gossip aimed at you or your family. But Jesus had an answer for this. Time and again, he wanted those who called themselves his disciples or followers to do good instead of returning evil. It's counterintuitive, it's even countercultural, but it's clearly outlined in the pages of Scripture, not as an option, but as a command. Representative-elect Scott Barger, his wife Beth, and their 9 children went through just such a trial of faith recently. Before he was in politics, for 15 years, he was pastor of a thriving church in Indiana. He came home to help care for his aging father and in time felt a new call to public service. Scott, welcome to State of Independence. Let me ask you an obvious question first. Was it hard to leave the pulpit?
Oh, it was terrible. It was terribly difficult. I love preaching. There's nothing like opening up the Bible, doing your best to explain the truths contained in the Bible and watching it change someone else's life. It was wonderful. It was a wonderful opportunity, and I was glad that to have it for 15 years. It's tough to walk away. It was tough to walk away from that.
I'm sure it's hard to walk away. Now you don't come from a family of preachers. You're not.
No, raised going to church whether I liked it or not. My dad was a small business person.
Where in Pennsylvania?
In central Pennsylvania, right now Altoona, Pennsylvania, is where I was born and raised. But ended up in ministry not by my design, but by God's design, and found out that I had a knack for preaching and teaching. Loved it, enjoyed it.
Did you have a come to Christ story, or was it something where you just...
I was born and raised in the church, and so I have a come back to Christ story more than a come to Christ story. I don't remember a time in my life where I wasn't in the church, and a lot of your viewers probably have a similar kind of experience. I don't remember a time when I wasn't in church from the time I was little, but when God has a way of bringing you back to what he wants you to do, and that was certainly my story.
How do you do that? How did God do that for you?
Oh boy, the consequences of my own dumb decisions, obstinance, rebellion, teenage years, college years, thinking I knew what was best for myself. Had a falling out with my parents. It ended up with them giving me an ultimatum. Get yourself to a Bible college or else. And I picked the first one. At the time, I was living in the country of Spain with no income and no prospects. I was studying pottery, which, as you can imagine, Joe, isn't exactly lucrative for a wayward teenager. But they said, why don't you come on back, get yourself to a decent college, and then see what's next. And I went to Grace College in Winona Lake, Indiana, and everything changed.
Yeah. And you knew once you got to Grace, you knew that you might be headed toward ministry?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I was prepping for initially. In my mind, I wanted to serve as a chaplain in the military, and that was my plan, was to do that. And along the way, God ended up putting me in a small church in the cornfields of northern Indiana, Joe. Every image that just came to your mind was probably true about this little church, white church on a hill, cornfields on 3 sides, gravel road on the 4th, maybe 50, 60 faithful saints going there every week, talking about the Bible, sharing their stories, doing weddings and funerals, all of that stuff. And I didn't realize, initially I went in because I needed a job when I was in seminary, but then found out that not only did I have a gift for it, but I loved it. And from there, my intention was pastor for life.
Yeah. And so how do you get back to Pennsylvania from there? I mean, you're serving the Lord in Indiana.
I'll give depending on my mood, Joe, I'll either give my dad credit or blame, but he fell ill and through his life had collected a lot of businesses, just small businesses, and a couple of them were radio stations. When God took them home, Mom put a call out. I have 3 younger siblings, and she sat the 4 of us down and said, come back. And someone needs to come back and help me because I can't do it myself. And I was the slowest one to say not it, so I was it. And I came back and left the ministry, which was a difficult decision because up to that point, Joe, that's what I thought my life was going to be. I could see it until the day that I died. I was going to be pastoring in small churches in northern Indiana until I wasn't. And when your mother calls and says, I need help, you help. And I did, and I came back and found myself on a talk show in a radio station. One of the stations my parents owned was a small political talk show, and I was free. We couldn't afford somebody, so they put me on the air, and I found out that I was entertaining, maybe not always smart, but definitely entertaining. And I made my bread and butter complaining about politics. That's what I did every day. And there's a lot to complain about, right? There's a lot there's plenty to complain about. And through that experience, though, I really do believe that God put people in my life to challenge my default position, which was to complain about politics on the air 5 days a week. And the challenge was essentially this: you're not going to change anything if all you do is complain. So why don't you, if you think you can do better, why don't you do better? And so after hearing that a couple of times from different people I trusted, I decided, you know what? This is a fair critique. Complaining isn't going to change anything. I could maybe sell radio commercials, but I'm not going to do anything to help my community. I'm not going to change the state of politics in Pennsylvania. And so I threw my hat in the ring, and for the first time.
What'd you run for?
Ran for county commissioner first, and had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know how to run a campaign. I didn't have a campaign team. I didn't have a campaign manager, no consultants, no budget. It was me and my wife in my work van, which I had used to haul drywall in, and we put my name on the side, and we drove around Blair County and talked to as many people as we could, trying to convince them that I was a good choice to be county commissioner. And we got within about 101 votes from beating an incumbent, and that was devastating. But someone came to me, Joe, and said, in politics we have this expression, you can lose beautifully. Well, there was nothing about losing a race by 101 votes or whatever it was that felt beautiful to me, but it did attract the attention of people in our community that said, you might want to give this a try. This might be better suited for you. You obviously conducted yourself with integrity. People like you. They know you at least a little bit better than they did last year. And so I don't know why. I can't tell you why I did it again after losing. But within about a month or so, my wife and I decided, let's give it one more go. If we can get the team together of supporters, because we knew we couldn't do it ourselves, that wasn't going to happen. And God gave us that team, and we spent the next 8 months working really hard.
So what was it like?
It was awful. On the one side of it was awful, because suddenly you're in the news, and I was not in the news as much before. And people have opinions about you, and why was he a pastor? Why isn't he a pastor anymore? He must have been fired. There must be a scandal there. And I'm something of a private person. I never had to explain my career decisions to anyone before. I never had to go back through all of the silly things that have come out of this big mouth of mine and explain those to voters. And suddenly that's what we were doing all the time. We were on the defensive, and it was tough because what's being said about you isn't true.
Right.
And you want to correct the record, but there's way more people out there than you.
You did a lot of door knocking, right?
Oh,
you went to a lot of people's houses, and you spent time in their living rooms.
And that I think is what helped us, because the rumor mill's going. All manner, the stuff I heard about me, it was sometimes, if it wasn't so frustrating, it would have been comedy. The things that people were saying. And you want to set the record straight, especially my wife, Beth. She is a very justice person. She's very right and wrong. This is not right to do this. She wanted to confront it. We would have to talk each other down a little bit, say, look, we're not going to go out there and fight, not the rumor mill. What instead we're going to do is meet as many people as we can, introduce ourselves, talk about what we're important, talk about our family, what's important to us, talk about our family, and convince them that maybe there is something more than what the rumor mill is saying about Scott Barger.
How many houses do you think you visited?
Oh, thousands and thousands. I mean, myself personally, 3,000 or so. My wife, a couple more. She would say that she knocked a couple more doors than me, and that's probably true. And then we had a team of other people helping us. We think we got to just about every door in our district. So.
But it's hurtful stuff. I mean, so how do you?
Oh.
So you're a Christian guy.
Yeah.
So you're not just like a regular guy running for office. Like an ambitious guy. I'm running for office because this is something cool to do.
Right.
And I'm thinking about me. But you're running for office because this is a way to serve your neighbors, to love your neighbors like you love yourself.
Joe, when we went into this, one of the first conversations we had was, how do we live out Christian virtue, the teachings of Jesus Christ in this sphere, which is new to me. I've been in other spheres. I've been a pastor. I had been, employees in different businesses. I'd run businesses, some of them not so successfully, some others more successfully. But this was the first time in the political sphere. And the question I would ask myself, my wife and I would talk about this, what does it look like to live this out in the sphere of politics, to be a Christian? And not the kind of Christian that approaches political discourse as, hey, look, I've got the answers because I'm the Christian. I'm the one with the moral compass here. I'm going to tell you. No, to approach it as someone who's keenly aware of my own shortcomings, very aware of my failures, the mistakes that I've made, and knowing that God has forgiven me anyway. And then the command that we would then reflect that vertical relationship, if I can use that term, with God towards other people, knowing that they are also created in His image and they've also made mistakes, but God also loves them and forgives them. How would you treat them? How would you want to be treated if you were them? And so you start thinking, well, what does that look like when you're talking to someone who is never going to vote for you because they think you're terrible? But I'm not first and foremost talking to them as a candidate. I'm talking to them as a Christian, first and foremost. What does that mean when you talk to someone who has a very negative rumor that they want to spread about you? What about your opponent? How do you treat your opponent? How do you treat them if you win? How do you treat them if you lose? These are the questions. How do we reflect the relationship that we have with God that is informed by mercy and grace and long suffering? Because I know that I tried God's patience. I'm sure that I did. And yet here I am, and He's given me opportunity, and He gives me a second chance at marriage. He gives me a second chance with my kids. He forgives me. He's merciful. He provides. So how do I reflect that to people, with people around me, my neighbors, and especially in this world that is dominated by negative attitudes, negative approaches, and viewpoints? How do I conduct myself in a way that reflects this core truth of Christianity, that we all have made mistakes, that we all can be forgiven, we're all created in the image of God? What does that look like for someone running for office to live as though they really do believe that those things are true?
Yeah. Well, you have a wonderful personal story because you don't have any obvious advantage over other people. There are a lot of people who've been married 2 times out there, and I'm sure that they're anxious to hear from a Christian person. What's that like? I mean, you have a blended family now. Mm-hmm. How many kids together?
I stopped counting at 9. We have 9, and different ages, and that's not easy. Two different households with different expectations of what it looks like to run a family, to manage a household. But God gave me a strong-willed, red-headed wife to help navigate this phase of my life, and she's very good at it. But it's not easy. It isn't easy, and we decided to make that transition. We got married and we had a gaggle of teenagers, and for those of your viewers who have been through those years of parenting, the teenage years will test your faith. It'll test your belief that people are fundamentally good, or it's just teenagers, right? Yeah. And this is what we're doing. But I'm blessed to have good people around me to help me through that. And my kids are great. They're smart. I think they'll be way more successful than I've been, and that's what you want. That's what you want for your kids. And I'm happy that I have a wife who is there with me and tolerates it pretty darn well.
Yeah, you're blessed. You're blessed to have all that. So how do you handle it? It's wonderful and heady stuff to win an election and to be headed to the state legislature. But how do you deal with the pressures that come from people in political life? There are people in your party that would say, you are supposed to be, now that you've won, you're supposed to be part of the team, and you're supposed to act a certain way. And everybody on our team is right, and everybody on the other team is wrong. Isn't that right? And you of course agree with that. Now your allegiance is to Jesus first, and so How do you deal with that?
Well, first, in a very pragmatic sense, I think I continue doing what worked so well during our campaign, and that is first acknowledge that I am ignorant of many things. And I have huge blind spots personally in gaps in my knowledge. I don't know everything. So surround yourself with good people who are smart and speak the truth and really do embody the things that you consider to be virtuous and good. And then don't be so prideful and arrogant that you ignore them. Actually listen to these people that surround you and do, because they probably know things better than what you do.
That's right.
And listen to them. Don't be, there's nothing wrong with that. If you don't know the answer, ask someone who does and learn. So I would hope that that worked well in the campaign. My guess is it'll serve me well in public life in Harrisburg. So that would be pragmatically the first thing. And the next thing is to remind myself that I sit across from someone, say they're on the other side. I'm a Republican, they're a Democrat. They are first and foremost created in the image of God. First and foremost. That is what we have in common. And then start looking for all of these other things we have in common. Well, chances are there's going to be some representatives in the General Assembly who have teenagers. Well, there's something we could talk about over a cup of coffee, right? There's going to be more than a couple of them who are on a second marriage and have to deal with that challenge of how do you blend a family and manage mismatched expectations. You can talk about that. You can talk about hopes and aspirations and frustration with the way government works now and what can we do to fix it. There's a lot that unifies us. There's a lot that we have in common. And I think you start with that.
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful attitude. It's certainly a Christ-like attitude to have. Yeah. In today's world, it's so easy to vilify the other side or to say that, our side is right and the other side is wrong, and there's no in-between and there's no reason to talk to them either.
Right.
But you see people, as the Lord does, is made in the image of God, right. And their political party doesn't separate them from the love of God.
No, it absolutely does not. And I had a seminary professor who taught me this. He said, look, Scott, truth is true no matter where you find it.
That's right.
The truth is the truth.
Right.
And it doesn't matter if it's a Democrat who's saying it or a Republican. If they're right and they're speaking it, that's the truth. And if they have the good idea to fix the problem, it doesn't matter that they're on the other side. If that's the idea that's going to fix it, if that's the solution, then it's the solution. And to have that kind of humility to at least acknowledge that there is a chance that just maybe they're right and I'm wrong on this one. If you just start with there, then we can have a conversation. But if I go into it thinking there is no way that you are right because you're on the other side, we're not going to get anything done.
Right. Well, what you're talking about is just being a Christ follower, which is a wonderful thing, and you're not talking about ambition. Some people come into this and say, well, I just got elected in my first term, and in 5 terms I want to run for state senate, and then I want to run for Congress, or I want to run for governor of the Commonwealth, and I've got this plan, and that plan is based upon me really succeeding and doing what I need to do to get there. You're not coming at it that way.
I was a pastor for too long, and one of the, maybe for some people way too long, but one of the lessons I learned is that God has a whole different rubric. He has a whole different mechanism for measuring success and failure, right? And that has been true for as long as there's been people. What God considers to be success is often different than what we do. So I am not going to stand above God and say, well, wait a minute, God, that's not a successful political career. This is. No, success is defined differently when it comes to God. And I'm just here, I'm along for the ride. I just try to make wise decisions as best I can and trust that He will establish what is successful and bless where He's going to bless.
Amen. Well, you're getting an insider's review of a political campaign. We're not promoting one party or a political position over another, but we're focusing on the way a Christian, a follower of Jesus, had to wrestle with the pressures to run a campaign that's anything but Christ-honoring. When we return, I'll ask Scott what happens next. Stay with us.
Learn more about Joe Watkins and the mission of this program at joewatkins.net. And tell Joe what you thought about today's program in the comment box.
Scott Barger is a member-elect from Altoona, Pennsylvania. He waged a campaign committed to avoiding name-calling, gossip, and what some have called the politics of personal destruction. He wanted to win differently, and he did. He's unopposed on the fall ballot, which means come January, he'll be a member of the Pennsylvania House of Representatives. Scott, how are you preparing yourself for the Capitol? I mean, it's a heady thing to be headed off to the Capitol.
It is. We trying to be humble, ask for advice. Don't be afraid to ask questions if I don't know. There's a lot of acronyms. There's a lot of three-letter abbreviations in government that I don't know what they all stand for. I ask questions. There's nothing wrong with that. Show that you're willing to learn. I'm doing my best to, as you said, I don't have an opponent in the fall. I live in a pretty Republican area, but it's not exclusively Republican. So my homework over the next couple of months is to reach out to people of other political persuasions and introduce myself, and to kind of communicate to them that I intend to do my best to represent everybody who lives in my district, not just people who agree with me, but also people who disagree with me, because they deserve representation.
Is the tone in your district, has it been as sharp as it has been and divided as it has been nationally?
So far, unfortunately, most of the division, the divisiveness, and I would say mean-spiritedness has come from my own side, which I don't think is unique to the Republican Party. I think it's a human thing that we tend to pick at each other. I experienced that in my church, infighting in my church. We all believe the same thing, but sometimes we don't get along. That part's been tough, but I do believe that ultimately, like I said earlier, we have more in common than we have things that separate us.
How about the person you ran against and beat? Did you all talk at all after the campaign ended?
We did, and initially it was easier. In recent weeks, not as easy. The transition, but I tell myself, it must be difficult to be transitioning out. I know it's challenging transitioning in. My opponent didn't retire, he lost an election. And I try to, as best I can, view it from his position. I know he loves his community. I know he wants what's best for his district.
Is he thinking about running against you in the primary in a couple of years?
Oh, I don't know. That would be an interesting scenario. But I don't know. But I do know that this isn't easy on either side of it, and so try to extend as much grace and mercy as we can. And I know ultimately that he loves his community, his family. He cares about his family, cares about his neighbors. But we'll get through it.
Yeah. Have you met any of the leaders, at least in your party, already on Capitol Hill?
They've reached out to me pretty quickly. I was surprised by that. People that I'd only read about in the newspaper suddenly, I don't know where they got my phone number, but they did, and calling me up and introducing themselves. And they've been great. They've been very helpful. Kind of as a political newcomer, not a lot of experience. They've come alongside, given me the education, some advice, support. But right now, the Republican Party in the state of Pennsylvania, we have bigger battles to fight. Outside of my race is pretty much settled. So I don't have their undivided attention, but that's okay. They're there and they answer my questions, and they've been very gracious.
How far from Altoona to Harrisburg?
Oh, about 2 hours. It's a 2-hour drive. So we'll get down here often enough to say hello and do our job well. But it's not that bad. Home is a quick trip away.
Yeah, it's not bad. Well, I know you're excited about it. Your family as well?
I think.
What do your teenage kids think about all this?
My teenage daughters evaluate the whole process in terms of wardrobe, so they look forward to having the opportunity to get a new outfit, maybe on swearing-in day. I don't hold it against them. That's the way they evaluate it. Sometimes they're a little bit surprised that they would read my name in the newspaper or see that I'm on the news or on the television, but they got used to it pretty quickly, and now we're just excited about what we're going to buy to wear on January 7th. But I love them.
Yeah, and your wife, how does she feel as we head into this? She did all the hard work with you. She knocked on the doors.
She did all the work. She's all the brains behind it. She helps me identify that true north. She's constantly keeping me in check. She's not afraid to tell me when I'm wrong, and she will let me know if I vote the wrong way. I'll hear it from her first. I'm not as concerned about the constituents. I'm concerned about Beth.
Smart man,
yeah.
Very, very smart man. Well, Scott, it's been a privilege getting to hear your heart for God and your neighbors today. I know many in our audience will be cheering you on and including you and your family in their prayers. We wish you a successful period of service in the state Capitol. We'll be right back with our great producer, Jeff Coleman.
You're watching Joe Watkins' State of Independence on Lighthouse TV. Positively different. Share your comments about today's program in the comment box at joewatkins.org.
And now let's talk to our great producer, Jeff Coleman.
So I got to know Scott and his wife Beth pretty well during that journey of their campaign, and enjoyed a lot of conversations about some of those decisions. And sometimes you can work with a political candidate and their instinct, their default is to do the right thing, but there's all of this counter pressure that says you should do something else. In Scott and Beth's case, they had the right instincts, but there's nobody in the political world telling you you can do it differently. Nobody, very few people, because in a sense, very few people have seen it modeled at the national level, at the state level, at the local level. Everyone says, well, you can bring your principles and that's good, but that's like bringing a knife to a gunfight. So why would you disarm yourself? If they're going to come at you, why can't you counterbalance that with just a little bit of ugly from your side? And then at least we'll be at even, and then you can go do your nice stuff. Right. So I think often people confuse Christians who are acting or exhibiting Christ-like characteristics in a campaign as being weak or woke. I mean, those are the accusations against people like Scott and Beth and their family. But they held, and I think in the end voters looked at it and rewarded them. And then how you treat, you heard it, what he just said, how you treat your opponent with kindness and respect, asking for advice. Really, it reminds us that these positions don't belong to us, that they're temporary trusts.
Do you think the key was going door to door?
I think a huge part of it's door to door. Of course, in any campaign, door to door is kind of the validator to what people see in their mailboxes or on TV. Anybody can say anything on TV. But when you meet them in person and you get their measure, oh, he's taller, or he's shorter, or he's much nicer than he is on TV, or he comes across a particular way. Door to door or meeting a candidate, or even going to a rally, lets you take their measure, as you know. So I think it's really important that candidates not just spend a lot of money, saturate the market, and then stay back and we'll just wait and see what happens. People want to ask very difficult questions and at the end be able to render their own verdict or make up their own mind.
Yeah. Well said, well said. Well, our discussion today just doesn't apply to people in politics. Loving your neighbor as Jesus commands isn't confined to people who live public lives. So whether God has you behind bars, sweeping floors, running a small business, or raising children, there's a standard He's set for the way we treat others. People, no matter how different from you, are made in God's image. They deserve respect, even honor. Ask God to show you who, when, and where you can serve and love the people in front of you today. And if you have questions or comments for me or for Jeff, please use the comment box at joewatkins.org. I'd love to hear from you. I'll read and reply to each message. So for Jeff Coleman and the entire team here at Lighthouse TV, thanks for being with us tonight. From America's first capital, Philadelphia, I'm Joe Watkins. Thanks so much for watching. God willing, I'll see you next week. I like it that he didn't